Now we're going to go step by step through how to create every aspect of the Yelp app. First thing we're going to do is go and open our Genymotion emulator and our Android Studio. We're going to choose a new Android Studio project. We're going to call this Yelp Demo. Click Next. Phone tablet is checked. API 18, Android 4.3. That's all good. Next. Blank activity. Next. Okay, our first activity will be called Intro Activity. Finish. Now, if at any point I'm going too fast, pause and make sure you're caught up. I want you to do this exactly as I do along with me in your own Android Studio project. Okay, so remember we talked about before this rendering problems. So if we hit rebuild, there we go, we're all good. Okay, this first screen is gonna be pretty much exactly what we did in Unit 1. We're gonna go to Relative Layout. I'm gonna go down here to Text. I'm gonna change this to Absolute Layout. Okay, and if I type in a couple letters, boom, I get the autocomplete suggestion, Absolute Layout. Now remember, we can take out everything, all of this padding. We don't want to take the tools out, we can take that out. Now, for the Hello World text view that's automatically put there, we can go to Design and click this and delete it, or while we're in the text, we can also just delete it from here. Because remember, this XML sheet here is an exact representation of our design tab. So notice that went away there. So a few things we need to do to set up our app. We need to get rid of this action bar. Do you remember where to do that? Yeah, exactly. Values, styles, go over to here, this part, instead of dark action bar. Remember, if we highlight that right after the period, if we hit Control Space, we get a bunch of different options. Yeah, that's the one, no action bar. When we go back to our layout activity here, the action bar is gone. Now, let's set this up over here so it looks a little more familiar. Let's go to click on Android and select Project. Now I'll have to open up the folders that we need. Main Yelp Demo. Let's go over here to App, Source, or SRC, Main, Java will give us our Java file. We only have one for our interactivity. If we open Res, we get our drawable folder, right? That's where all our images will be stored. And our layout, that's where this and the XML live. That's this layout file here. Okay, another thing I want to do is I'm going to go to the Android manifest and I'm going to add something here called Android large heap. And I'm going to set that to true. This will just give us a little more memory because we're going to be adding a lot of pictures, especially with our scroll views. Okay, let's go back to our layout here. And we'll need an image view in order to put our first image in. Remember, I can drag it here, or I can drag it all the way up to the component tree and put it in this absolute layout. Okay, now we need to set the source for our image. Okay. Wait a second, we don't have any pictures yet because we haven't uploaded them to our drawable. This is all just stuff that comes with it, but we need our Yelp assets. So this is a good time to navigate to our Yelp assets. Okay, so I have my Yelp assets over here. There's quite a few of them, but don't worry, we're gonna be using them one at a time. So if I click here, hold Shift, click the bottom one, I can get all my Yelp assets here. I'm gonna push either Command C to copy, or I can go here and say copy 37 items. go to my drawable folder. I'm going to right click on that and I'm going to select paste. And it's going to ask me, do I want to copy those there? And yes, I do. Okay, so now you can see we have all of our assets that we're going to be working with. Okay. Now let's go back to our activity intro. Go back to our image view, make sure that's selected. Click on source. And I'm going to add the intro activity. And I'm going to add the intro image. Okay, looks good. Now we just need to add a button or a clickable hotspot over this login button. So I'm going to go down here, grab a button from the widgets, drag it on here, size it so it's about the same as the other button here. Okay. Now I can delete the text here. I don't necessarily need to because what I can do is set the alpha here to 0. Okay, good. Now, in order for this button to do anything, I need to set the on-click listener. A listener is just basically kind of like an alarm that you put on there. So if something gets clicked, in this case, something will happen, right? Kind of like if you had an alarm on your car. If the door gets opened while the alarm's on, it's going to do something, like honk your horn really loudly. Okay, so let's set our on-click listen. Since this is the login button, I'm going to say on login. And notice how I did on, I started with the lowercase, and uppercase with login. If I hit tab, that kind of locks that in there. If I go over to text here, I can see that my button has okay, now I made a mistake here. I meant to add on-click login to my button, but I accidentally added it to my image view. So one thing I can do is I can actually take this here. I'm going to cut that out. And I'm going to paste it here. Okay, so now my button has the on-click listener. So this button is going to take us to our login activity. So in order to do that, we need to have a login activity. Go over here to main, right click on that and add a new activity, blank activity. This is going to be our login activity and click finish. Okay, so if we look at the layout design of our login activity, it's just a blank screen. And we can set this up here in a moment, but let's go back to our intro and just make sure our button works. So in order for our button to do something, we have to actually set the code in Java. So go back to text. Up here is your shortcut back to the related Java file. Okay, I could also access it by clicking on the interactivity Java file here. So here in the middle, right under on create options menu, make a little space for yourself and write that very familiar method that starts with public void. And you remember what our listener was? Yeah, it was on login. In parentheses, we're going to put view v and some curly braces. Now this is red because this is the first time we've used view, and if we click on anything that's highlighted red, Android will usually give us a suggestion for fixing it. So I'm going to hit Option or Alt and return or enter, and it's going to give me these options. And what I want to do here is I want to import the class. Okay, so now it's okay with that. In here, between the curly braces, is the code that I want to run when somebody clicks on that button. So I'm going to make a new variable. It's going to be of type intent. That variable is going to be called I. And it's going to be a new intent. And what do I intend to do? I intend to transition from you can look up here if you forget what activity you're on, my intro activity, and see it found it. It's giving me autocomplete suggestions. I could just type it in, but I'm not a very fast typist, so these autocomplete things are great. Okay, so intro activity dot this is where I am now, comma, where I'm going is the login activity. Okay, it's right there, dot class. And don't forget your semicolon at the end of any statement. Okay, what do we do when they're red and highlighted? We click on them, we hit Alt, we hold Alt while we hit Enter. And this time it just imported it for us. Okay, so now I've set up my new intent that is going to do this, but I need to tell the computer to actually do it. So that's where we add start activity. What activity to start? Well, the activity we just created here, activity I. Now, before we run this, we need to make sure that Android Studio is talking to Genymotion Emulator. So if we go up here to this little icon and we click this, we can see the different Genymotion emulators we have. I'm going to run this one, the Google Nexus 5.1. So if I click on this, I need to write start, because notice at the moment they're all off. So starting device, Google Nexus 4. I'll be patient while it goes ahead and does that. Okay, so now my emulator is up. This is good. It's starting. On Mac, I use the shortcut Command Tab a lot to go through my different applications. I'm going to go back to Android Studio. So now this is on. That's great. Now I can actually click Run, and it's going to ask me, is this the device you want to run on? And yes, it is. I'm also going to choose Use Same Device for future launches, so I don't get this window every time. It's just going to assume I want to use the Genymotion emulator, the 5.1. Okay. So here we are. Let's see if it works. Great. Now there's nothing on our next screen yet because we haven't set up our login. That's what we're going to do right now.